What's your favorite scary movie?
Be like, I'm dying.
If some guy came up to me and said, "Hey, they guys," I'm like, "It's over and done. We're married now."
Someone in the movie, so I'm like, kiss. But
Oh God, what a sea of humanity.
We're not even on the screen. What's going on here?
Are we?
Where are we? What is going on?
Is this forever now?
Is this? Where are we? I have no idea.
Hey,
What's
guys.
going on? This was a bad idea.
Oh no.
What is going
Odd
on?
over.
Okay, hey, there I am. Let's do this. There it is.
Hey, let's
Yes.
go.
He did it. He figured it out. There we go. And chat's on there. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. I was trying to record some things last week and I think I screwed it up. But hey, welcome in everybody to 52/1994, the live movie conversation podcast where we discuss movies from the year 1994. I am your host, Cody Waits. I just had a thing there. And I'm joined by my co-host this week, Lieutenant Ryan.
Hey, what's up?
You got legs, magic legs.
I CGI'd them frame by frame. Hey, let's go. I've heard of that movie.
Yeah, I did just have a stroke. I'm so sorry. But welcome in. If this is your first time joining us, we are so happy for you to join us today. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up about the premise, we watch movies from the year 1994, 52 of them to be exact. And we do them by monthly categories. Important movies that were released this year. Doesn't matter if they're good, bad. We chose them because they're important to this year, and we talk about them. And then me and Ryan will go over some areas about the movie, and then we might ask some other things about other movies that aren't 1994 related. But this month we are doing Oscars because tonight is the Oscars, if people care about that. But But yeah, in honor of the Oscars being this month, I chose the 5 Best Picture nominees from 1994, and this month, or this week, I am struggling, is Forrest Gump. So, before we introduce this movie and give a bunch of details about it, Ryan, I know you've seen this movie before, but what memories do you have with this film?
This film was on repeat, like it was for a lot of people in the 90s. I've seen this film 100 times. I haven't seen it maybe since I was a teenager or maybe in college. But yeah, I've watched it 100 times, and it is we have a lot to talk about.
I know. I was like, we're going to take the full time here.
It's going to be a messy pod, but it's going to be a chock full of great takes because this movie has so much in it. I have so many feelings about it.
I don't know when the last time I saw this movie, because every time you see this movie, and I think this is the case for every single person here, even though those people that have never seen this movie completely have caught it on TNT or AMC or TBS or whatever, they catch like segments of this movie, and then you sit down, you watch a little bit, you know about the running scenes, or you know about him in Vietnam, or all of these things, but everybody has seen clips of this movie at least, or quotes from this movie. So especially if you were born around the time we were, like you said, it was on repeat in your house because
it came out when I was 8, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we probably watched it a ton. Also, one of those movies maybe that when my parents really liked something, which we'll talk about why parents really like this movie, like I was allowed to watch it when other things that had this much cursing or sex or nudity in it or violence in it, I wasn't, but they were like, Forrest Gump gets a pass.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with one of the scenes. Like, I remember the scene, and we'll talk about it, but like with Jenny in her dorm room, and I was like, how did my parents just be like, yeah, that's fine? I mean, I didn't understand what was going on, but
That's another thing. There's so many parts that eventually, I mean, I think the last time I saw it, I understood everything that was happening. But like so many moments I was rewatching it and I was like, man, I didn't get this as a kid. I
Yeah.
didn't understand that she was about to jump off that balcony. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what she was doing before that.
I didn't understand that he came in a bathrobe. Who
Yeah.
knew?
Wait a second. Let's jump right in. What? When does he come in a bathrobe?
Oh, he comes in her bathrobe
In the
on
college scene?
in the college scene. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I was watching this with somebody, and we paused the movie, and we had a 30-minute discussion about that scene, about like whether she should have done that. Period. Because I didn't think I thought she just gave up because he didn't get horny right away,
No, he
and I was like, if
says,
you're gonna go that far, you might as well fuck this dude. And so it's kind of rude. It's kind of cruel of you to like kind of like tease him and then be like, never mind. You're not a normal guy. You can't do this. So I'm done. He came in the robe.
yes, he says, I think I ruined your roommate's bathrobe.
I completely missed it. I watched this movie twice and I missed that line.
Yeah. We had the subtitles on, so I knew exactly what he said this time. Like,
Oh wow, that changes
yeah.
everything. Already learning things. Yeah.
Do you want to come back to you? You want to do this next Sunday after you?
Yeah. All my notes are useless now. They all revolve around that scene.
Pivotal scene, very pivotal scene. All right, let's talk about
20-minute conversation about that scene, completely misunderstanding what happened.
All right, let me get into the details of this, and then we'll go through some of these categories and talk about some of these scenes. So, the title of the movie is Forrest Gump. It came out July 6th, of course, around the July 4th weekend of 1994. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis. Some of you may have heard of him, small-time director, did Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway Flight, and all those weird-looking movies where he did all this motion capture stuff. Yeah. It was written by Eric Roth, who actually has a lot of writing credits to his name. I think Dune is on there, Killers of the Flower Moon, things that are like nominated for Oscars still to this day.
Wow.
But it's based on a novel by Winston Groom. I've never read the book. Have you read the book?
I have 2 pages of notes about the books if you'd like.
Okay, we'll get to it.
Yeah, I'll go through what happens in the books.
Okay, good. The cast of this movie, I'm not going too deep into this, but Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump, Robin Wright as Jenny, Gary Sinise as Lieutenant Dan, McKelty Williamson as Bubba, Sally Field as Mrs. Gump, and then we have appearances by Haley Joel Osment as Little Forrest, Little Forrest Jr., I should say. Dick Cavett is actually doing in this. He filmed part of this. He's the famous
Late night host. Yeah.
Yeah. Sam Anderson is in here, and Siobhan Hogan. Siobhan Fallon Hogan is the Dorothy, the bus driver. I'd seen her in some
great. I noticed how
Yeah.
great she was, but I didn't know that was anybody of a note, I guess.
I remember her mostly from this movie and Men in Black. At the beginning of Men in Black, she's Edgar's wife. Edgar?
Yes. Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Synopsis for this movie: slow-witted Forrest Gump has never thought of himself as disadvantaged, and thanks to his supporting mother, he leads anything but a restricted life. Whether dominating on the gridiron as a college football star, fighting in Vietnam, or captaining a shrimp boat, Forrest inspires people with his childlike optimism. But one person Forrest cares about most may be the most difficult to save: his childhood love, the sweet but troubled Jenny.
Yeah, that's what happens.
That's what happens. This movie had a budget of $55 million and went on to make $678.2 million, making it the number 2 grossing film of the year.
Didn't beat Lion King. Yeah.
It did not beat Lion King. That's a hard one to beat. Rotten Tomatoes. This is where I think is fascinating. So Rotten Tomatoes has a score of 76%. IMDb has a score which is of 8.8 out of 10. And Letterboxd has a score of 4.1 out of 10. I think that is so fascinating. With like the Rotten Tomatoes score seems a little bit like more like
yeah.
Those
Well,
other
I mean,
ones
we'll
seem
get
high.
into it at some point, but the big conversation about how generations feel about this movie is obviously like bubbling underneath probably all of the internet like messiness of how people feel about it.
Yeah. Roger Ebert loved this movie, 4 out of 4 stars. He said, "I can't think of anyone else as Gump. After seeing how Hanks makes him into a person so dignified, so straight ahead, The performance is a breathtaking balancing act between comedy and sadness in a story rich in big laughs and quiet truths.
I'll add to that. I wrote a few review quotes down. One from Ebert that I really loved because it's not very specific, but it gets to the heart of why this movie is great. As he says, I've never met anyone like Forrest Gump in a movie before, and for that matter, I've never seen a movie quite like Forrest Gump. So the uniqueness of the character and the movie itself carries it to greatness alone, I think.
Yeah.
No matter how you feel about it.
This guy says Forrest Gump has the elements of an emotionally gripping story, yet it feels like less like a romance than like a coffee table book celebrating the magic of special effects. Stephen Holden of the New York Times.
Yeah, we are in like, look, guys, we found CGI. Like
Yeah. And that is a Zemeckis thing too. Like,
Yeah.
and this one kind of disguises it a little bit. You get him doing obviously Back to the Future, and the special effects there is pretty, mind blowing for 1985. And then you get Roger Rabbit, where you have a human being interacting with cartoons. Such a great movie.
Love
And
Roger
then
Rabbit.
like this, like at the time, special effects wise, like this movie, and I was still blown away by some of the special effects in this movie.
They're pretty well done.
Not so much the 60s scenes where they're like superimposing faces, and
I don't remember that looking so bad, but it looks bad.
looks bad now. It looks really
like
bad.
It looks like like Thumb Wars, like the talking mouth.
Yes.
What John Lennon looks like.
But like Lieutenant Dan, like that stuff, still like that looks good. It
looked really good, and I was reading about it. Frame by frame they recolored where his legs were, which is wild.
And I had a nice little tidbit of trivia. I'm sure you might have it too, but I think it's one that both you and I would enjoy. So we'll get there when we get down to that. But then I was going to say, like, Robert Zemeckis gets into his motion capture phase where he does Beowulf and Christmas Carol and Polar Express, and it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's like a boomer director thing, right? Like they get this crazy technology and then they go way too hard with it. Lucas did, Avatar, James Cameron.
Yeah.
Spielberg kind of like maybe pulled himself out of that tailspin, but I mean, he definitely had some time where he was like, let's get in there and like play with computers now. And it starts really great with like Forrest Gump, but then it ends up with Polar Express or whatever. So,
this movie has definitely left a lasting legacy. Some awards that it won were Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. So Tom Hanks wins 2 years in a row. Best Visual Effects, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Film Editing. It was also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Gary Sinise, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Makeup, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Sound Effects Editing. So this thing was nominated like
it was a monster,
like freaking Oppenheimer this year. So
real quick, I want to give credit because I looked it up. I circled when I wrote down the Oscars, the film editing, because once I saw that, I immediately understood how editing is huge for this movie. Like the editing really makes it like amazing. And as much art, a lot of great directors are hiding behind better editors, right? Like editors don't get their credit. So I looked it up and he had Arthur Schmidt, I think the name is. And he's worked with Zemeckis a lot. He did all the Back to the Future movies. He won a second Academy Award beyond this, and it was for Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Nice.
So he has a really cool career with a bunch of movies. But yeah, man, he deserves credit for making Forrest Gump amazing because the editing is really sharp and important in this film.
Yeah, I think Scorsese, Tarantino. I was trying to think of somebody else to pull off there. Spielberg should thank their editors a lot because
and a lot of their best directors have lifelong partnerships with these people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some of those guys do not have the movies they have if it's not for their editors. I think about Goodfellas, or I think about Jaws, or I think I'm like, there's no way that those movies are as good as they are if they don't have a good editor in there.
Yeah, totally.
Other things, there was a sequel to the novel that the first line of the sequel says, "Don't never let nobody make a movie about your life story." And it's kind of like this meta novel where Forrest Gump is Tom Hanks and all this stuff is real.
Yeah, the second novel posits that the first novel, Forrest Gump is telling his whole life. And then that gets made into the movie we just watched. And the second novel is Forrest Gump as a real person dealing with the movie of his life being made. Where at one point later on, he meets Tom Hanks and says that he was unimpressed.
Man, harsh for Forrest Gump to tell you that you didn't do a good job. Yeah, that's got to be bad. There was also an Indian remake of this in 2022. I've seen a trailer for it. It takes place from 1970 to like 2020 or whatever. So a little bit different. The trailer looks insane. Like just making a copy of Forrest Gump today is insane.
Yeah.
It just, yeah. Also, Forrest and Dan Shrimp Emporium. Bubba Gump is a themed restaurant in 33 locations around the world.
That's crazy.
The presidents of the United States of America had a song called Lump, which Weird Al Yankovic parodied into Gump. So this was a pretty, this movie left quite an impact on the world in large. Yeah. So now that I've gone through all of those details, anything you want to add?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna add. I forget Eric. I forget the screenwriter's name. But he says that he submitted a script for a sequel on September 10th because they asked for one, and then after September 11th, the studio was like, "We don't feel like a sequel to Forrest Gump is relevant in today's world." So that's pretty great.
I think I need Forrest Gump to be like a Mark Wahlberg character and saying like, I could have taken down those planes on September. I want him to have missed his flight.
Well, a little, we can get into deep, if we have time, we'll get into it deeper, but just a little taste. Forrest Gump does meet Ayatollah Khomeini in the sequel, and he does him and Lieutenant Dan team up again in the Gulf War and capture Saddam Hussein, to which Norman Schwarzkopf, the head general, says, Bush doesn't want us to capture Saddam Hussein. You got to let him go. So Lieutenant Dan dies, letting Saddam Hussein go. In the second novel.
Did you read it all?
No, I just read the synopses for both, and I wrote down every interesting thing I found. But yeah, I had a couple. The Rotten Tomatoes review, I like, is a good mid review, a whimsical odyssey of debatable wisdom but undeniable heart. So I like the debatable wisdom and the undeniable heart, recognizing both of those. And then a negative review from Janet Maslin.
New York Times.
Called Forrest Gump, a hollow man who is self-congratulatory in his blissful ignorance, warmly embraced as the embodiment of absolutely nothing. You didn't like it so much.
Man. This is the kind of movie that I wish what's that famous critic, Pauline Kael. I wish Pauline Kael would have been alive
right?
What was that?
She would have torn this apart, right?
Oh yeah. I think so. It's so weird. Yeah, I would love to hear.
Where every time somebody says something negative, I agree with it, and every time somebody says something positive, I agree with it. Every time. Yeah.
I can see the hate. I can see. Yeah, I get it all. All right, so let's talk about some of these scenes. I only wrote down 4. There are so many scenes in this movie that I love.
Yeah.
That
I feel like you would lead the way here, because I kind of stopped too, where it's just like they all lean into each other. It's more like arcs, like episodic arcs.
Yeah,
one scene.
I honestly, I don't have anything, like, I don't have any of the parts of him as a child, even though we do get that, like, him, meeting Jenny, and we get some important stuff there with Jenny.
Yeah, I said Forrest and Jenny, and then there's important moments. What's established there, right? Run, Forrest, run, is established, and that becomes a theme of him running, and in Vietnam, and then obviously at the end. And so that's her helping him. So that establishes that. And then the Make Me a Bird So I Can Fly Far, Far Away establishes her as a troubled person, which is horrible, actually. The abuse scene was more like disturbing than I remembered. How casually that this movie jumps into not just physical abuse, which I could have left it there, but sexual abuse as well.
Yeah.
And it kind of jumps out. But that's supposed to inform Jenny's decisions through the rest of the movie. And one of the most confusing, problematic things I have about this movie is how to feel about Jenny, how she was written and how she acts and what their relationship is. But yeah, Forrest and Jenny is the most important thing of the childhood through college. And then Forrest kind of splits paths for a bit.
And we were talking about scenes that we weren't really quite sure what was happening in them. Like, I don't think as a child I knew about what kind of abuse. Like, it was not in my mind to think about the abuse in that way. Only other maybe like physical abuse.
And you get it from his like a voiceover. And then I don't know if it's supposed to be played for humor or not, because he's like, oh, her dad really loved her a lot, always touching her and kissing her or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah,
I get that Forrest is stupid, so I don't need him to be stupid about that. And I don't know if that's supposed to be played for humor, because it's not funny.
Yeah.
But it is like very effective to be like, he doesn't then, I don't know. It's almost it's rough. They could have left it at just poverty and physical abuse and not been so explicit. It's just that one line that's explicit. And then it moves on pretty quick. But then you watch Ginny have a lifetime of relationships with abusive men.
Yeah. And then this leads into them going to college, I guess, is the next like transition for them. And he runs.
He runs.
And he runs. It's so funny. Oh my God. The village idiot. I think that's what they call him or whatever. That some bitch sure can run. We also left out an important scene where his mom has sex with a man so that he can go to public school.
Yeah. Sally Field. Let's not gloss over Sally Field.
No, not at all.
Also in the sequel book, Forrest Gump plays for the New Orleans Saints.
No way.
Yeah. I'm just gonna pepper these in here.
That's incredible. Yeah. I used to mimic that scene where Forrest is sitting outside as his mom is getting railed upstairs, where Forrest does the he.
Boy, that guy, I don't know who that actor is.
That's Sam Anderson.
Okay, he's a monster, but every line he delivers is so good.
Boy, your mother shook.
Mrs. Gump. Like, he just eats up every line.
Yeah. Your mom sure does care about your education. Wild. But I love like
5 IQ points. This isn't for good grades. This is to keep him out of a special education school.
Yeah.
This is to flub his IQ from a 75 to an 80, so that he could stay in regular school. Then he has to go and, like, I don't know, succeed at school.
I have questions about IQ tests. And was that how they did it? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on anything, but through working at disability and reading medical records, I read a lot of IQ tests, and a 75 won't get you disability, but it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't have sped programs in schools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like a country school in the late 60s, or early 60s.
Early 60s.
Probably isn't sending low IQ kids to some special school, but they might. There's probably dotted like special schools around the country, and if you're close to enough to one. But I think most of the time those kids were just kind of like passed along, and dealt with.
One thing I love about the Forrest and his mom scenes early on are every piece of advice she gives him, she like basically says the opposite in the next scene.
It's
like,
funny. Yeah.
Your boy is different, Mrs. Gump. Everybody's different.
Yeah. Well, I think like right next to each other, she's like, "You're exactly the same as anybody else," and then like 2 seconds later, she's like, "You're special. You're unique."
Yes. And she does that a couple times with the special, you're unique, and you're different or whatever. But yeah, there are those scenes where she says something and then the next scene she's saying the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So I like that, and breaks my heart when he asks her about like, what's vacation mean?
Yeah.
Or it's not what's vacation mean, when he's like, where's daddy? He's like, he's on vacation.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Is he dead? Is he just was he a one-off guy that?
I don't know why I assumed that he just ran out.
That's what I thought too. But
I don't know. It's also like they don't explain like where her inherited wealth comes or whatever. Because they may not be rich, but they got that big house and big property.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning, they're like hosting a bunch of people, and so like who knows where all that's coming from. Elvis is hanging out there for some reason. Fucking Elvis.
Forrest Gump teaches Elvis how to dance.
Yeah.
This disabled white kid teaches Elvis how to. It's insane. This movie.
Yeah, like in chat, that line about vacation means you leave and never come back. I thought that he left too, but I also thought that was cruel. I was like, your kid's dumb. Don't give him wrong definitions.
Yeah.
And then like
the only thing I could think is like, what if he's like, Jenny is like, hey, let's go on vacation, and then like Forrest has a reaction to that, like, that means we're not coming back to wherever.
Right.
So, okay, that college, we get the cum blanket scene, the cum
blanket scene. Yeah, that's what it's called now.
This is the first time we also see Forrest react to Jenny having somebody get physical with her.
Yes.
Although when I watched the scene as a child, I thought she was getting beat up or like roughed up in that scene. I don't think that's what is happening in the scene.
On
I
stage?
think
Oh,
no,
no. Well, she specifically says, "Stop, you're hurting me." She says, "Stop, you're hurting me," right?
I
So I
didn't.
don't think he's getting beat up. I think he's being too sexually aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a rough way, but she's also saying, "Stop." I mean, he's very,
Yeah,
justified,
yeah, yeah.
and she's
I
kind of an
guess I
asshole.
only heard her
"What are you
like,
doing, Forrest?" Like,
yeah. But he is rough with her at the end. I don't know. I thought something else.
yeah.
I thought this was more of like that was a mistake. They were just getting heavy, and then she hit her head on the window because it's a car, and cars aren't
Mhm.
comfortable to do anything
I may
in.
I may
So
misremember, but I think I
no,
remember the line, "Stop, you're hurting me," happening.
okay. If that is true, then I'll
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back to my childhood memory of it and being like, oh, he's beating her up.
Otherwise, like him, I don't think it's simply him misunderstanding sex, right?
Yeah,
Especially with that's the long line of other men that are clearly.
but yeah, why does Jenny do what she does in the room there?
Oh, I don't know. I read that part as just being like a kind of flighty college kid.
Mhm.
She's just there, and then she's curious. She asks him. She's like, "Hey, do you ever think about women?" That kind of thing. And so I almost read it as casually cruel before I realized that. Yeah, before you told me that, like he comes and that's why she stops. Because I'm like, stop fucking with him. Like I don't know how
Yeah,
I feel about you sleeping with this guy. Period. Based on your like discrepancy of understanding and cognition and stuff like
hmm,
that. But if you're going to, don't fuck with them. Like, go ahead and like do it. But yeah, yeah, I think she's just kind of being a little like self-absorbed, not mean, not cruel, but probably not being that that thoughtful to him either. She's
yeah,
not protecting him in that moment.
no,
Yeah.
and I mean they're best friends. They're playing doctor, whatever. I mean they're a little
Also,
old
just
for
really
that
quick,
kind of
because
thing.
one of the confusing things about Jenny and Forrest is that I feel like as a little kid, you see that they're best friends. And I feel like there's at the end, you see them care about each other more. But in the middle, the movie doesn't have enough time or doesn't take enough time to show them being best friends as they meet each other. So there's
Yeah,
little things about him trying to give her a medal, and she's like, "Why are you always so good to me, Forrest?" And her running at my least favorite part of the whole movie, her running across the reflecting pool is just dumb.
that I have that
I
as
don't
one of
actually
my
know why I
scenes.
hate that so much, but I watched it twice, and both times I hated it. But she's excited to see him. But I needed little things in the middle that weren't just fights. They're always having fights and
Yeah.
misunderstanding each other, and she's always running away. I needed a reminder that these are actually best friends as adults too. And I don't feel like I got that enough.
Yeah, I think the scene that I struggle with because the second time we see Jenny and him after college is her singing on stage at the Go Go Club or whatever is Bobby Dylan.
Mm. In
Hilarious.
Memphis, that's not in fucking Memphis. There's no way. There's one river in Memphis, and it's bigger than that. Just,
Anyway, but that is where she's like, "Stay away from me." She
mhm.
says that to him, and he's like, "I'm going to Vietnam," and
And
she's like,
one of the few times I really like her as a character, I really like her as Forrest's friend. Is when
that,
she's about to run away. She's just like, ah, fuck, you're going to Vietnam. I can't fix that for you. I don't have time to really be a good friend for you. But when she says one of my favorite moments, like, yeah, listen, don't be brave. If you get in trouble, just run away. And as
mhm,
a thing to say to like kids being shipped off to Vietnam, that's like a touching in and of itself. But her being like, I can't save Forrest, but he doesn't understand a war in this
yeah.
way or whatever. Like, this is the best advice I can give him before I myself run away.
And I like that line, but it does come right after her, like, uh, being like, "Get the fuck away from me! Like, you're
Mhm.
ruining my life every time you show up." Like,
Yeah.
um, so it is. I mean, if they are best friends, yeah, you've been upset with your best friends before, but if they need you in that moment, like you said with Forrest, like he's going away and might not understand what
I
war
read
is.
that as her trying to be independent and like I and she says like you can't keep trying to save me, Forrest. Like you
Yeah.
can't keep doing that. Like I need to live my own life. Yes, men he tried to grab me. Guess what? Men try to grab me sometimes. I can handle that. I don't need you around that way. And I think by the end she's like also not mad at him anymore. I don't think she's
Hmm.
trying to like Lassie or Old Yeller or whatever like say you got to go home like get out of here kind of thing like I think she's just mad for a minute and by the end feels softer and realizes, well, it's not going to be a problem because he's going to Vietnam. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be around to like do that anymore.
I write you every day.
Yeah. She
So
says
yeah,
she looks back and says nothing to that.
yeah. And we figure out why, because all of those letters go undelivered.
But I think they're addressed to her childhood house too.
Right.
So I think it's meant to say that she's not opening his letters. I think that's what the movie means, but it's confusing. So I'm like, Forrest doesn't know where she is. Like, she's not at her childhood home. But
Yeah.
that's what the address on the envelopes is.
He doesn't know any better.
It's not like her dad's going to keep the letters around or whatever.
Well, I think it's going to her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her aunt's house or whatever. All right.
Anyway,
So
we get into Vietnam then, right?
yes, that is where I started. That was my first scenes. We're like Vietnam. That's where it starts.
Ooh. The Vietnam sequence has it has so many laughs. It has it has great things in there. A part of the political badness of this movie is like there's scenes in there where Vietnam's made to be pretty fucking horrible, but overall in post Vietnam, like this movie like really kind of like takes the edge off of how bad Vietnam was, and it's not a great look for the movie. It doesn't have the time to be, Platoon. I get that.
Right.
If you want to be Platoon, it doesn't have the time to do that. But even at the very end of the movie, like Jenny's like, were you ever scared of Vietnam? He was like, yeah, well, it was really pretty over there. I'm like, all right, guys, we don't really need to make Vietnam look nice.
One note that I saw in the research about this was that they showed that sequence to Vietnam vets and Vietnam, like the fighting sequence to them, where everybody gets killed and everything. And they say that is the best portrayal of being in Vietnam because you don't see the other people. You never see the Viet Cong. Right. And they're like, you just saw bullets come from the from the tree line.
I mean, that looks a little cheesy now, but yeah, just like a flamethrower, like an explosion destroys people next to him.
Yeah.
The blood and guts is bloody and guts. Like I get it. Because I was conflicted about my take where I was like, there's that sequence in there. The battle sequence is fucking like brutal. But overall, the way the movie talks about Vietnam, like I didn't care for that much. And the way that this movie is just about boomers washing their hands of their own mistakes.
And you get a little bit of that. Like Forrest gets picked up after college to join the army. And then you get him on the bus where he meets Bubba for the first time, basically a parallel of him getting on the bus for the first time when he goes to school. And Bubba's like, oh, I got drafted. And that's it. He's not pissed off about it. He's not having any commentary on being drafted into the army and not being screwed out of being a shrimp boat captain. And he's just like, when I get out, I'll be a shrimp boat captain.
Yeah. I get that it's a short sequence in a big movie about other things. It's not my favorite take on Vietnam. I also, later on when he does the Abby Hoffman speech, they cop out like by letting that guy pull. So you hear everything Forrest Gump has to say about Vietnam gets taken out because it's all like feedback. And then at the end, Abby Hoffman's like, "That's great, man. That's great." And I was like, "Oh, like it's not fun that you didn't let this character say what they thought about Vietnam because he's either going to take what the movie stance is, which is like, yeah, it's pretty bad, but it wasn't all that bad. And we don't want to hear him say that." Or it's got to have to be something actually meaningful about Vietnam, which the movie doesn't want to do.
So this is what Tom Hanks said that he said during that sequence of the Abby Hoffman, where you can't hear him on stage and everybody's like, what are you saying? Supposedly, this is what was said. Sometimes when people go to Vietnam, they go home to their mamas without any legs. Sometimes they don't go home at all. That's a bad thing. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
And that's what we missed.
Yeah. That's a bad take on Vietnam.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Like, I think it is clever that they cut him out there.
Take. I mean, I get that it's a character's take. That's fine coming from that character. Yeah. I also like, because the skimming I did about like the political readings of this movie, like there were some efforts to try to make it subversive, which I don't think it is, but it's really fun to read some of these scenes that way. And I like the idea that he's so good in boot camp that it's like, yeah, dumb people are the tools of the state. Like they are like weaponizable. Like if you don't have individual thought or like don't protect yourself, you can get taken advantage of by an imperialist power and made into a weapon and aimed at a bunch of strangers and, on the other side of the world. And Forrest Gump's a perfect soldier because he just does what he's told and he never complains.
And a fun fact about this is that normally Forrest Gump would not have made it into the military because of his IQ. Like if he had disabilities like that or anything, he wouldn't have made it in. Physical like him having to wear those braces. Like that's a
Yeah.
disqualifier. But because Vietnam is the special event in our history that, fucked over a lot of Americans and everything. But they lowered all that. They took all that off specifically for the draft in Vietnam. So
Yeah,
that
I
they
do think
took
that
us-
actually the least interesting thing I have from the book is that he actually does get like temporarily deferred in the book and
Oh,
then
really?
drafted later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read some lists of the statistics, and the statistics on those people in the army, the people that should not have been in the army or
Mhm.
military at that point, died at a higher rate than the people that
Yeah, I'm sure
did
they
not
did,
fit
man.
those. So good job.
Yeah.
Good job,
we
Robert.
get great lines and great scenes and great filmmaking in the Vietnam sequence for sure. Like we get all of Bubba, like right. I mean, 'cause
Yeah, that's
we meet Bubba at the beginning of Vietnam, and he's like a indelible character that people remember a lot from this movie. But he is there at the beginning of the Vietnam arc, and then he dies, and he's not there anymore. And he's great. Love
and
Bubba.
it's and it's still
My good best friend. My
my
best good
my
friend.
my best good friend Bubba. Yeah. And it's so weird that all of the again, I know we're coming at it from Forrest Gump, and his perspective of everything, and it is all played for laughs. Like even some of the stuff, like when before they get attacked, when he's going through like this guy's Dal or his
Mhm.
name's whatever from Dallas and Tex. I don't know where Tex is from, and we
Yeah,
were
it's
always
funny.
looking for some guy named Charlie.
Yeah.
Um,
All the rain is coming up from underneath, and
oh
all
yeah, the
you get
rain
the
sequence.
famous shrimp stuff is happening here. Yeah.
Just an interesting. Imagine Oliver Stone if he was like, "Hey, let's make a comedy."
Oh my god, I want to hear Oliver Stone's take on this movie. He hates this movie. This is
He has
everything
to hate
he
this
like
movie.
lives to destroy.
Yeah. Um, let's
But
see.
I don't know that
Abby.
much else happens of importance, right? He learns ping pong at the end, and this leads him to DC.
Yeah, learns ping pong, goes on the USO tour, or not USO tour, whatever. Goes to China.
Well,
All
that
that.
happens later. He learns ping pong there, and then he's in DC.
Okay. Yeah.
Congressional Medal of Honor for getting bit in the butt.
For saving 5 people is what he
Yeah.
gets the Congressional Medal of Honor for. Not getting bit.
Well,
in the butt.
the person I was watching with pointed that out later because he goes, "Hey, I want you to have my Congressional Medal of Honor to Jenny." And she's like, "No, I can't take that." And he's like, "Well, I only got it for doing what you told me to." But she told him to run, and it was him that decided to go back, and that's what got him the
Right.
Medal of Honor. Running didn't get him, so he misunderstands that Jenny's helping him his life more than she is, or is a better friend than she actually is.
I think it's interesting that Forrest didn't seem traumatized at all after the war. We
Yeah.
never see. He does fire his gun, which, but he's firing blindly out of like a foxhole. Like he never kills. We never see him kill anybody, or get in any other fights except for this one fight.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know.
I mean,
how
I
to
think
feel
the movie
about that.
has to, and I can definitely forgive it for that. But yeah, it's weird.
It
Just
is
like
weird.
it's taken all political things is weird, but Vietnam being an especially bloody and horrific, long, extended, deadly part of our country's history and the world's history, it's kind of crazy to zoom through it in 10 minutes, having a good old time, and then leave it behind so easily. Obviously, Dan doesn't leave it behind so easily.
Yeah. We also get Forrest Gump calling out Watergate, calling the security on the guys at Watergate. So
In the sequel book, towards the end, he meets Bill and Hillary Clinton, and accidentally calls out Whitewater. He breaks that story.
Awesome.
Yeah, going back to the well.
So
we do get Lieutenant Dan, who's important. The scenes of him losing his legs, the brilliantly edited funny scene of his like history of all of the Lieutenant Dans throughout history dying in war, but he loses his legs because Forrest saves him. And one of the a very intense scene where he pulls them off the bed and tells him how angry he is for staying alive. This movie slides between comedy and drama so beautifully. It really does, because it's just like ice cream Lieutenant Dan for a minute, and then all of a sudden, like Lieutenant Dan's like anger and trauma and dreams being dashed to the next.
I love when he waves that ice cream cone. Ice cream.
Of the like lines that I quoted a million times when I was a kid, Lieutenant Dan, ice cream is the one I said so much. Yeah.
I quote this one from Abby Hoffman, just the way that Abby Hoffman's character says Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump.
I always remember him saying it that way. Also, they use their one F word. Be it fucking yeah. They use their one F word so hard.
It was awesome though. You never see that. I've never heard of that guy before. I mean, I've heard of Abby Hoffman. The
actor.
The actor, yeah. He's great for that 20 seconds he's on screen. But yeah, then we get the reflecting pool screen scene that you don't love that much.
It just I don't know why I hate it. I think what I hate it is when I watch it now, I realize that like most of that crowd is CGI'd and they're just staring blankly. Like everybody stops for 60 seconds to watch these two do this thing and nobody makes any noise. And it's strange.
I just heard a podcast where they were talking about like crowds are still such a hard thing for people to capture in a movie, and they were the podcast I was listening to was talking about Dune specifically. Like there's a arena scene in Dune 2, and they're like the crowds just look terrible.
If
like
you slow down and look at any crowd, any fake crowd, it's always going to look bad. Yeah.
So like, yes, the crowd in there is interesting. They had 1,000 people though, 1,000 extras for that, real extras, and then they CGI the rest. There were more people at that than there were at Trump's inauguration.
Got him.
But I do think this is one of the better Jenny Forrest scenes.
Yes,
is when they're walking through DC
and they're catching up. Actually, it does feel like they're best friends again. Against my criticism earlier, where I needed them to see them be best friends in the middle of the movie more. That is a scene where you do see that they're friends again, but you see it from afar. You see them kind of walking around, and then you see like you hear Forrest's narration over like what she's been doing and stuff.
Yeah.
And well, real quick, we also get the Black Panthers, and I feel like those are meant to be cartoonish. And both times I watched them, I was like, "Let's fucking go!" Like I love these guys. The bad thing is that when Jenny gets hit again, Forrest Gump is the only one in the room who seems to care. Like nobody else in that room is like, "Whoa, why are you hitting this person?" Everybody else seems fine with it. But when the Black Panthers are screaming in Forrest's face, they're being a little rude, but everything they say is based as fuck.
It did surprise me though that they didn't like. Obviously, that guy, I guess, is working with the Black Panthers and their movement in DC at the time. But like, aren't the Black Panthers known for like to be against violence of women?
Yeah. So I know the Black Panthers as an organization has. I think it would have been better. I don't think the movie was trying to do anything. It was just focusing on the main thing, which is Forrest being the guy and saving her again, right? But it would have been better if people in the background at least were like, "Whoa," and did that, and then Forrest was the first one to go into action. That would have made more sense. But you kind of just watch in the background. Nobody even blinks an eye, which is maybe on purpose or maybe not, but it's weird. Black Panthers is an organization very, very good to women historically and generally. I don't think the movie's trying to do this, but there could be a subversive take on the fact that a lot of civil rights organizations in the 60s and 70s were not good to women.
Right.
Which led to a lot of fracturing of civil rights groups like in the 70s as like the feminist leaders wanted to be given leadership roles and treated better than they were in places like SNCC, you know.
But it just makes me think of I've been listening to this history podcast, and we're kind of in the stages of abolition and then also suffrage and how like abolitionists were like, no, you women cannot be here, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, get the hell out, because we're not about that.
Cady Stanton, but she was bad for that one. And then like Sojourner Truth way back in Seneca Falls, like the "Ain't I a Woman" speech is like, you know, a beautiful piece of American literature and political activism where she's like making the plea of like, look, you can't leave me as a Black woman out of the suffrage movement. Aren't I a woman? Look at all the ways I'm a woman. The same way you're a woman. Like if we're talking about women, I need to be included. But there's always an issue in any like civil rights movement is that the discrimination and subjugation usually of women is just like a thing across all societies in different ways, while they're fighting more tiny unique wars against political oppression. How you treat women in those movements is worthy of a lot of exploration itself. So like how they did that in this movie, I think is the movie doesn't give a fuck about Black Panthers and doesn't think all civil rights activists are like un-American hippies. I think the movie feels that way. I'm not sure Robert Zemeckis does, but the movie does. So they're just a bunch of cartoons that give you a reason to show that Jenny's once again fucking up around the wrong people and choosing the wrong men, and pure Forrest Gump war hero is there to save her again.
Yeah. Fuck that dude though.
Oh, that squirrely little fucking Trotskyite. Like,
yeah.
He looks like a villain. He talks like a villain. Also, the next day at the bus, he's like, "I'm sorry, baby. get that bastard Johnson. It's like, oh wow, I didn't mean to hit you, honey, but I was just really mad at the president. It's this war and that bastard Johnson. That's the only reason I lost my temper. That was fucking wild.
I'm having a bad day. Biden did something again.
Yeah, it's like horrible to say like I had a bad day at work, but at least work is something you did. It's not something you watched on TV. Yeah.
Yeah, so and Jenny goes back with them to Berkeley, I guess, where they came from, and then is this when he goes on his little USO tour with the ping pong, which for me, least interesting part of this movie.
Oh, really? I love ping pong a lot as a sport.
I like ping pong, but like out of everything that's going on, like we get the John Lennon scene, we get him playing in China, and I just it doesn't do anything. And that's where that is where he gets his first amount of money, though.
Yes, that's the only thing that really adds to the character in the movie is that he gets some money and becomes kind of a celebrity.
He gets a little bit of celebrity and then becomes a shrimp boat captain because he has the $50,000 to buy the shrimp boat and all that other stuff.
Other than that, you don't get any great lines or great character moments. So I agree. It's pretty weak.
Yeah. But I like the shrimp boat sequences.
Yeah.
And everything. Wait. It's during this scene that he meets up with Lieutenant Dan in New York, right?
Yes.
He does the Cavett show. Meets up Lieutenant Dan. They go, they gave you the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Can we stop for a second? I didn't know because I was a kid. Gary Sinise is hot as fuck. He's like trashy hot. I had no idea.
I think I can get on board with that.
Yeah, he's great.
Love Gary Sinise in this movie.
He's great in this movie too. You said he got nominated, but he didn't win the supporting actor for this. Yeah, that's important. That might happen before ping pong, but that whole Lieutenant Dan sequence is pretty memorable. I think it goes a little hard. We were talking about how like alcoholism is very cartoonish in 40s. Like there's just bottles everywhere. You're just like every moment you're throwing an empty bottle somewhere looking for another one. And then I guess it's one of my what the fuck moments, but when those hookers show up and their names are Cunning Carla and Long Limbs Lenore. And then they're just like talking like Betty Boop at New Year's. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? It's so over the top.
We were just there.
Make a wish. It sounds like a musical for a minute.
Oh my gosh.
But you see Lieutenant Dan has fallen into the depths of the despair and depression. Even God, he's got problems with God.
Yes, that is another thing. This is such a church movie. Like people from church growing up, like, let's do a sermon around this.
Yeah, you guys were talking last week about like like the wholesomeness in the 90s things. And I feel like this is the thing 90s movies did where like we're not going to talk about religion and dogma specifically, but everybody believes in God and everybody needs to. And it's like a Deus Ex Machina. It's dropped in casually. Where in 2024, if you had a character who believed in God, you would kind of have to justify it and explain that character has, because it's taken for granted that God's not a part of anybody's lives unless said otherwise. Whereas in the 90s, it was taken for granted that a Judeo-Christian guy was part of every character's life, no matter who they were and what they did.
Somebody had mentioned Rudy earlier in the chat, and that's a very thinking about that. I'm like, everybody that watches Rudy is Catholic for an hour and a half. Like, you are in that. Like,
it's just built into the world. There's no questioning it. Like, there's just no other way. It's like the weather. It's just there.
Yeah. But I like that scene where they're at the bar and Lieutenant Dan's got the party hat on and he's just sitting there like just staring straight forward, depressed. Like, I don't think it's funny. Like, this time around when I'm watching it, I'm just like, this guy's in it. Like, this is
so funny that you say that, Cody. Because one of my like biggest laughs, that's not meant to be a laugh. Both times I watch that movie, and I see him with his hair, and it's full of confetti, and he's got the New Year's hat on, and somebody's like blowing one of the things right in his face, and he's just staring dead-eyed. I laughed my ass off.
I think it's funny, but like he is clearly like
that's the point of that scene. But I thought it was the funniest image in the world. I need a screenshot of that. It'll make me laugh all the time.
That's what I'm going to go as for Halloween. It's just that moment in that movie. But then he gets called stupid. Lieutenant Dan gets mad and pushes that girl and says, "Hey, you can't, don't call him stupid." Kicks him out. They make fun of him for being a freak because he falls out of his wheelchair. And Forrest Gump says she tastes like cigarettes.
I forgot. That's a good line.
Yeah. And then he leaves to go buy his shrimp boat. And
Which I
stupid
mean,
or
pretty much
something?
just leads into Lieutenant Dan coming back, and so maybe it's like ping pong then shrimp boat to keep the Lieutenant Dan scenes apart from each other, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, and I don't know what to say, but I remember the shrimp boat stuff a lot from being a kid. It all looks good. I don't
I
know.
think everything on the shrimp boat, even during the storm, looks great visual effects
Yeah,
wise, especially with when you're dealing with, like you said, with Lieutenant Dan not having legs and like how they do everything with it. Like that was amazing to
yeah,
me.
you're right. That's that nomination for art direction, probably. Like stuff like
Yeah.
that is really good in this movie. They think through those things. They pick great locations. I think it's a little bit Savannah, a lot of Alabama, but mostly the Carolinas too.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's definitely where those scenes are being shot in Beaufort, Carolina. I think.
And we also get Lieutenant Dan screaming at God,
Hmm.
which,
And then once he's like, and I think he's okay with God now. And then all of a sudden they
yeah,
catch shrimp. Yeah.
yeah, they catch her, and he's swimming in the ocean. He jumps off the
Yes.
boat and
Yeah.
swims in the ocean. Does a little
It's a good
that.
scene. I buy it. It's silly,
It
but
is silly.
I like want Lieutenant Dan to be happy, and I buy that he's like he kind of like stops being angry at Forrest and resenting
Mhm.
him, and he's like, "What an absurd fucking life I'm in. I'm just gonna enjoy the absurdity and accept it." And
Yeah.
I do think it explains that every shrimp boat gets destroyed because they're at harbor in the hurricane, but since Gump and Dan are at sea or in the river, wherever, like they survive somehow, and then now there's nobody else to catch shrimp but them, so they start cleaning it up.
Which I mean, capitalism, right?
Yeah,
These two
God,
white
God showed
guys
the
just
light away, like
these two white guys.
can survive the hurricane, and then now he gets to have all the money.
Exactly. And I guess he leaves because his mom gets sick and then he has to go home, take care of her, and he leaves Lieutenant Dan in charge of the entire company,
Yeah,
which I guess he did okay. He got him invested in some fruit company and
that's true. Yeah, beginning of the second book, I think Lieutenant Dan sells his shares, and like there's like the shrimp market explodes, and then he loses all his money.
that book doesn't exist.
Yeah, the
Oh
second
my
book
god.
starts off with the shrimp market like deflating, and the company fails. And then
So
the thing that happens right after that is Forrest Gump becomes a janitor at a strip club.
awesome.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about with him going back to his mom. So I always cry at the exact same point in this movie, which we're getting to. But I found myself really getting emotional and tearing up because it just hits me in a different way now. I don't know. I mean, I know why. But like when he's going back to his mom and she gives him the line about like, hey, life is like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
Everybody dies, Forrest. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that scene, like between Sally Field and Forrest, got me. Like he stares at her, like before going in or whatever, and he does the same thing with Jenny later. Like before he comes in, he gives a look and
that's
like,
interesting because I remember I totally buy that. I just wasn't keyed into it, so I remember like even after like thinking about it after watching the movie, I was like, "What? All right, then his mom dies." I was like, "I don't really remember much about his mom dying," so it didn't really hit me. My teary moments come at the end for sure.
yeah, no, this one for whatever reason, this one got me this time. But yeah, then the next thing I had was Jenny returning and
yeah,
the twice I guess she returns.
Yeah.
Or no, Jenny returns and fucks him. That's the first one.
Well, is that like all right? Do they fuck during because one of the big emotional moments is him saying, "Why don't you love me?" And then I may not be a stupid man, but I know what love is, which is a great line. I may not be a smart man, but I know what love is. But is that when they fuck too? Does she like?
Yes.
Okay.
That is the night that all happens right before she comes, because you kind of get the opinion or not the opinion, you get the impression that she's like, I don't love you. Like, I don't love you like that. I'm never going to love you. And this is where like, I'm a little confused, or not confused, but like he has that speech. He goes out on the porch and leaves her. And then the next scene we see him sleeping in his bed and she comes into his window and they have sex. And she says, I do love you, Forrest. Is that a pity fuck? Or is that I actually, you know what? I do love you.
I don't I think it's both. I don't think I think she understands that she loves Forrest, that he's the purest love that she's ever experienced. But that she can't love his. I don't think she can love his intellect in the way that she would love somebody of her own intellectual level, and
Mhm.
she always knows that too. Um, well, it's problematic. Jenny's so fascinating as a problematic character. Yeah, I think she loves him as a friend, but also as come from a long like habit of also sleeping with men, like and like whether for where she's staying and with drugs and with bad men. Do we remember why she comes back? Is it after her like suicide, like she's drugged
Yeah.
out, she almost jumps off the balcony, and does that make her run back to Forest?
Yes, that is what it is. She gets
That's
all
what happened.
drugged out during that section and then comes back to Forest.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I do think it's a pity fuck because I don't think she sees him romantically or sexually, and I think even by the end when they're married, that's also a transactional. I think an acceptable thing that happens at the end, but a
Mhm.
transactional one as well. But she does love him, but not romantically.
Yeah. And then but I also, and I think of it in the same way that like her relationships are transactional with these other men too, that
Mhm.
she's met up with, in the way that she knows how to give back to those men is through sex. I don't love that,
No.
like, for obviously, but like I think that's part of it too. Is that this is the only way she knows how to show Forrest that she does love him without like,
Yeah.
instead of just, being his friend forever and dancing in the home together. And
Red, I think she wants to, and I mean, I think there's real love there, but yeah, it just isn't going to be that. And I agree with Chat. We may need to wait till we get there to talk about it, but yeah,
yeah,
what Chat's saying about the ending, I also feel complex about, but it is interesting.
yeah. So we get that, and then we get like, I don't remember what happens in these 5 years like after that, between like them doing, oh, he runs, this is the
Yeah.
running section.
So you were right about ping pong being pointless. In retrospect, running looks cool, but is the dumbest. And I want the movie to move toward the end now and not actually go on this running like
Yeah.
15-minute like side thing. That's also one of the few things that they changed a lot from the book and characterization. One big thing is in the book that Forrest Gump's more of a savant with communication and social problems, but he's not low IQ.
Hmm.
Because as evidenced by the fact that he has such good math skills after being institutionalized, they send him to NASA to be an astronaut. Uh, to which point, then he goes into space with a male monkey named Sue. And then Sue crashes the rocket in New Guinea and they get captured by cannibals. And the chief cannibal teaches Forrest Gump chess. So later on, he becomes a professional chess player. But through the rest of the book, his monkey named his champion orangutan named Sue is with him for the rest of the book the whole time. Anyway, so
These are great. These are
yeah.
great.
But in the book, this is the one big sequence they added that wasn't in the book. Was the running sequence, the ping pong, the Vietnam, the high school football stuff. All of that's in the book, but the running thing isn't.
Yeah, and I get the purpose of like why he started running. Obviously, he's so hurt by Jenny, and he doesn't know how to react to that, so he just starts running like in reaction.
I do like
Instead,
it as a psychological thing, and it almost
yeah,
like, the movie almost becomes a little bit of an art movie, like a little bit of magical realism at this point, where he just runs forever. As like a cheap metaphor, it's kind of good, but also and it looks really good. The '90s meme jokes can suck. The shit happens, and the have a nice day stuff is stupid.
yes, I hated that part. I
You get some
hated
beautiful
those.
cinematography, and it's cool for a minute, but it's kind of pointless. It just kind of has. You just need a break between that Jenny scene and then the ending.
Yeah. So it splits it up for that reason, and we do get that he is angry,
Mhm.
because of how Jenny has kind of left him high and dry after that. But then I guess the next thing we do is she sends him a letter and puts us back in the beginning of the movie where he's telling these stories to strangers on these benches. Which, how do you feel about that as a plot like a plot device?
I think it's great. This movie gets away with so much. It's doing
Yeah.
so much at once. Because I remember thinking like at the end when the feather and Curious George comes back, I was like, oh, those are also metaphors, motifs now. Like
Yep.
you had the feather and Curious George at the beginning, then you have it again at the end. I was like, you're just like all ideas. You're putting every idea in here. So like but most of them work. It feels like a very full movie, but it doesn't feel overly bloated, except maybe like the running sequence going on too long, kind of thing. But so yeah, I think the frame story of him talking to strangers is great, especially for a movie that takes place over years and lots of different settings. It gives you excuses to jump from one scene to another.
Yeah.
Did
And
you
I
watch it?
like how each one of the characters that he's talking to have different reactions to Forrest and his situation, leading up to the older woman who's like, "Oh, you're waiting on that bus and to go there? It's like right there. Just go there." After she
Is actually a really cool emotional moment where you've gone on this whole journey with him and you realize now like where he's going and why he's going there. And he's only a few blocks away. You get excited for him just as he
Yeah.
gets excited. It's pretty
and
good.
and then my tears start from this point to the end of the
Yeah.
movie.
Real quick, I'll say that the dude, the one guy who sits on the bench, what a douchebag. The guy, he doesn't believe it. Well, I forget. He says one thing that's kind of mean, and then it's when he believes everything Forrest says, but then all of a sudden he can't believe that he's in charge of like Bubba
Bubba
Gump.
Gump.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're sitting next to a millionaire. Then he laughs at him and he stands up and walks away. And I was like, weren't you waiting for a bus? Like, how did you? Why were you? He just
That's
walked
true.
in the park. Yeah.
He just couldn't take the lie anymore. He's like, I can't sit on this bench with this guy anymore wait for my bus.
Yeah, that guy was a jerk.
Yeah, that guy sucks. But yeah, we get Jenny. He runs to Jenny's apartment, shows up at Jenny's apartment, and we get the revelation, that
He has a son.
that he has a son, and and it's cute little Haley Joel Osment.
Oh my god, he's so cute.
He's so fucking adorable.
Bert and Ernie.
Bert and Ernie. And then they watch the TV like that. Oh my god.
He also says Gump with a P. He goes, "Hello, Mr. Gump."
Hello, Mr. Gump. He got a day named Forrest too.
I was like, Jimmy, how do you not know that you need to be direct with this man? Like, why are you fucking with him?
Is he smart or is he like?
That's one of my cry moments. I'll just spoil my cry moments now because there are 2 points. Forrest says everything, even when he says, "I know what love is." He says it with some emotion, but he's very like flat. And his voice cracks when he says the smart line. And then when he's talking to the grave at the end, his voice cracks. And because it never cracked throughout the movie, both of those lines just make me bawl. Like,
yes,
he
same.
can't get the words out because he's overcome with emotion. You get to see this internal complexity that you've never seen in him. And it works.
And they're both lines about intelligence too. Like he says
so
the thing.
Proud of him. Like, yeah, how good he's doing.
So smart, Jenny. He's so smart. Like, oh my god.
And it lets you like rewrite the movie in retrospect, where you're like, every time he says "stupid is as stupid does," he's just reacting, like he's just in defense mode, like his mom taught him to. But he's hurt by it. He hates it. He never wants to be stupid. He just like believes in himself and just keeps going. And he has to for his mama, and he has to for Jenny, and he has to for Lieutenant Dan, and he has to for Bubba. But now, like with those moments, you get to like retroactively see, like, oh no, he's been hurt and scared this whole time.
Yeah,
and he's only been vulnerable enough to let it out in the face of like worrying about his son. It's just great.
But yeah, Jenny, they learn that, and then he's like, and she tells him that she's sick with some disease, and we're led to believe, we go on to believe it's like HIV.
Probably early 80s, right? They don't know what it is yet.
I think they said that it was intended to be hepatitis C, but obviously with the AIDS and everything from the 80s and stuff, that I think most people just assume it's AIDS. So he takes her home with him, raises little Forrest with her, and they get married too. That marriage scene is great because Lieutenant Dan comes back and magic legs. Oh God, is that Margaret Cho? That is his wife there. She looks like Margaret Cho.
Oh, man, she's got big cheeks like Cho. Yeah,
I think that's what it is. But then we get that they get married, and then like Jenny dies. One thing I'll also say about the death scenes is they never show you really the deaths of these people. He always says Bubba died right there on that river. On that, my mom died on a Tuesday or whatever. Jenny died on a Saturday. So we never see those.
Let's get back to the chats thing too. So like Jenny's decision here, like, it's definitely like at the end of a long life. I guess she's got her shit together, and I have all the sympathy in the world for people who struggle, right? Like it's not. That's what makes it so complex of how to feel about it. But she sees herself about to die from an unnamed virus. She's now like kind of away from her past bullshit because she has a kid, and she just knows like there's if I'm gonna die, this kid's alone. I know one guy who will love this kid as much as I love him, and one guy with money. And so like I'm gonna shoot my shot, and like I don't blame her for doing that, especially because it's gonna make Forrest happy too. But she's like, I think she looks down the barrel of like loving Forrest, like we were talking about earlier. And she's like, well, I can't be in a relationship with this man for 30 years or for the rest of my life when the rest of my life is decades. Like we're just too different. We need different things. And like we're just not on the same like cognitive level, and I can't be in a relationship for the next 40 years with him. But the next 2 years, as I'm dying to secure like like a future for my son, and in the next 2 years to be taken care of and to give give Forrest the love that I've always wanted to be able to but couldn't. It makes sense, and I'm not mad about any of it, but it's definitely a complicated that situation.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we think that she would have told Forrest about his son if she wasn't sick?
Oof. It feels like a thing she might have done if she ever became financially independent and like at a later age, right? I don't know. I don't feel like she would if she was still vulnerable and didn't have control over the situation.
I don't know though, because I mean, the whole point of this is like Forrest and Jenny keep finding each other through these years and everything. So if we don't get Jenny sick, doesn't he just? I mean,
I don't think she would ever be. I don't think she would ever be scared to introduce Forrest to his son. It would just be confusion, maybe, that she doesn't want to deal with. But Forrest will always do what she tells him to do. Like nobody's gonna like. I don't know, maybe in the fucking 82, they'd give Forrest Gump with an IQ of 75 custody over a child more than Jenny. But yeah, but that's never going to be an issue. So I don't think she'd be scared to, but whether she'd go out of her way to do it doesn't seem like a Jenny move until maybe, again, she's been clean for a while. She's got her life together for a longer and the kid's older.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, though, that she keeps that scrapbook of Forrest, too.
Well, I kind of find that that works against her because she's like, look, I love you. I kept a scrapbook of the past 15 minutes because that's when I stopped doing drugs.
Well, there was one story in there that I think is interesting. I saw it this time. It's like a National Enquirer one.
Yeah.
And it was like go-go dancer admits to having sex with Forrest Gump. And they have a secret
lover. Yeah.
Yeah, secret lover. And somewhere I read that was like Jenny. Did that,
yeah,
and maybe she did that for like money.
Maybe
divulge that information.
But the scrapbook is all running stuff because she wasn't paying attention to all the badass shit he did.
Yeah, that's true.
Life,
like, oh, you met John Lennon? Like that's crazy. You met 3 presidents again. I love that part. I went to the White House again. But yeah, Jenny returns. She dies. No, that's all I have to say about that. No, but that grave scene, especially when he says the part about the letter too. He's like, Forrest wrote you a letter.
I'm not supposed to read it, so I'm not going to. Tom Hanks destroys this role too, and the way that he talks slow and then he says some things real fast.
And I love that he based it off of the child actor that's in the movie for like 10 minutes playing Forrest Gump. Yeah, he's like, I'm going to base my accent off that kid.
Nice.
And another tidbit was like, people on the set of this movie had a lot of trouble like taking this movie seriously. They were like, this is going to be fucking terrible if he's going to keep talking like that.
Man, it's Tom Hanks is known as a great actor, but he's not known as a actor who takes a lot of chances or goes broad or outside of his comfort zone very much. But he did it here and kind of crushed it. It is ridiculous on its face, and then it works so well that it's legendary afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like this movie should not this role should not have done what it did for Tom Hanks, but it did.
And this movie shouldn't work as well as it does. It goes back to the Roger Ebert thing. It's like, I've never met a character like Forrest Gump. I've never seen a movie like Forrest Gump. So it's just it really like has to thread a needle and accidentally does. So it all works.
Should he have won for 3 years in a row for Apollo 13 the next year?
No, because that's just Tom Hanks being Tom Hanks.
He should have won for Woody that year instead.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
In my boots.
What else? Any other scenes that really stick out? Because I mean, I guess that's the end. I don't like
You said it
like
all, yeah.
the ending is super saccharine and cheesy. I do like him getting on the bus and meeting Dorothy. I thought that was a really cute scene. But
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, when the feathers, like when it's zooming out on the feather, I did just say into the silence around me, "Dumb, dumb man, dumb feather."
yes, that's what the tagline on the poster should be: "Dumb man, dumb feather."
Absolutely.
All right, who's your favorite character in this movie or
Lieutenant
scene
Dan,
stealer? Yeah, Lieutenant Dan.
totally.
Hands down, he crushes this. I
And
think.
honestly, because Ginny's character is not handled perfectly, because Robin Wright, I don't care for that much. She's doing a lot of acting
Ooh.
and she's trying hard, but I don't think she pulls it off in this movie. So there are moments where I see her acting and I appreciate it, but I really don't like her in the role. So the Ginny storyline doesn't quite work for me, and it's complicated. So this movie would only be cartoonish comedy if it weren't for Lieutenant Dan to bring it back into some darkness. And Gary Sinise crushes it.
I like older Jenny more than I like younger Robin Wright Jenny.
Oh my God! Also, real quick, when they're walking down now they're in high school. These people are not in high school.
Yeah,
I was like,
Tom
that woman
Hanks
is
is
40
not
years
in
old.
high school.
And like
I
a
love
child
that
dress.
he just takes rocks to the head all the time when he was a kid.
Yeah,
no.
I don't know. Again, the character's part of the problem, but I don't think Robin Wright does it. But anyways, Lieutenant Dan is definitely my favorite. He delivers so many great lines with so much intensity, and putting his despair next to Forrest Gump's like simple optimism is great.
Yeah, I agree. All right, quotes. Favorite quotes that you really want to pick out?
There's so many obvious ones that like I don't need to go through. Also, "Life is like a box of chocolates" is the most famous quote from this movie, and I hate that quote.
Yeah.
I think it's dumb.
I didn't write it down. I didn't write that or "Stupid is as stupid does."
Yeah.
I didn't write any of the shrimp stuff either.
Yeah. Another shrimp stuff. Those are the famous things, right? I like the beginning. I forgot that it started this way. Again, this movie like introduces so many themes that it almost like throws them out the window at points, and you don't care. But he starts with, "I've worn a lot of shoes. Those look like nice shoes. You can tell a lot by a person's shoes, where they're going, where they've been. I remember my first pair of shoes, and that's how you go in."
Mama said
I've
they'd
worn
take
lots of
me
shoes.
anywhere.
What'd you say?
I said, "Mama said they'd take me anywhere." He's squeezing his eyes real shut. Like, yeah. I love
Perfect.
that.
So there's these little ones that are hilarious to me because I don't remember them as much. But like when he talks about JFK being shot and then RFK being shot, he goes, "Must be hard being brothers." Must be hard being brothers.
Must be hard being a king.
Yeah, I guess. There's the point where the army recruiter goes, "Have you ever thought about your future, son?" And then there's a long beat, and Forrest Gump goes, "Thought?" Word thought. He's confused by the word thought.
What else you got?
Yeah, nothing great. Except we've talked about Ice Cream Lieutenant Dan. One of my favorite lines that isn't remembered as well, but I've done versions of it my whole life is was like when he gets the letter for some fruit company and says we don't have to worry about money no more, and he goes, "That's great. One less thing." That might be my favorite line of this movie.
Oh my god! I'm here to. Lieutenant Dan says, "I'm here to try out my sea legs," and Forrest says, "But you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan."
And he's like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah, fucking idiot. "Have you found Jesus yet, Gump?"
Mhm.
And he
Yeah.
says, "I didn't know I was supposed to be looking for him, sir." I do like. So you talked about this a little bit.
Mama
Like,
just chases him off with the broom is like a
oh
famous
my
one.
god,
That's
I
great.
quote that so much. Not
Because
in
the way
any
he delivers
situation.
it, because of Tom Hanks acting, like the way he does it, Forrest Gump voice, it's so good. Mama just
Yeah.
chases him off with the broom.
Mama just chasing mom with a broom. When she does ask him, "Were you scared in Vietnam?" and he gives that like that cheese speech of like, "Yes, I was, but no, not really." I like all the stuff that's in there.
I like
And
that moment. I think that moment works really well. I just don't like what it says about Vietnam. And the
Yeah.
editing there, again, Arthur Schmidt, like doing the editing, the way they do it there is pretty great.
But yeah, sometimes it stopped raining long enough for the stars to come out, and then it was nice. It was just before the sun goes to bed down on the bayou, which also is kind of like, "Are you an idiot?" Like, goes to bed. The sun goes to bed. Come on now. There was always a million sparkles on the water, like the mountain lake. It was so clear. Jenny, it would look like there were two skies, one on top of the other. And then in the desert, when the sun comes up, I couldn't tell where heaven stopped and the earth began. And it was so beautiful. And those are beautiful shots. Like, I love those
They're
sequences.
really great.
And then Jenny says, I wish I could have been there with you. And Forrest said, you were. And I was just this is where she's dying and I need to cry. And oh my God.
Sad. Actually, I do like that she says that, even if it doesn't, like, again, how do you blame her? Is she cruel or dumb, or is she just abused? And like, the movie just doesn't handle it too precisely. But like, I do like at the end that she's looking back at her life and listening to Forrest talk about his, and goes, "Fuck, I should have been on that path. I should have been there with you instead of the things I was doing."
Is this movie about Forrest Gump, or is it about the people around Forrest Gump that are influenced by him?
It's about the boomers not apologizing for anything.
Any other quotes that you wanted to talk to? Chat, if you have any quotes that you like in this movie, that please put them in the chat. The Forest around Gump. I hate these people.
I did have one more. When in the middle of the drama of like Lieutenant Dan pulling him out of bed, and he was like, "Do you know what it's like to not be able to use your legs?" And Forrest just goes, "Yes, sir, I do." He embraces it. He's like, yeah, I know what that's like.
Yeah, I know what that's like. Yeah. He gets so mad, like his face when Gump says that too. Yeah. It's just, he's so mad. Biggest laugh, cry, scare, or thrill? I think we've went over a couple of these.
Is I really like. The only laugh we haven't mentioned is I really like that when Lieutenant Dan tells him to shut up and get down in the Vietnam scene, that he starts whispering in his voiceover. It's like a great like fourth wall meta joke that even when he's telling the story on the bench, supposedly, like he's still whispering the narrative because he's remembering that he has to be quiet.
I had one too. Where we brought up the Black Panther scene earlier, but I love the line that Forrest delivers at the end. He's like, "I'm sorry, I had to fight in the middle of your Black Panther party."
Yeah, I've heard you say that quote a lot. That's funny.
But yeah, everything else we've already talked about.
I got some what the fuck moments. The KKK. How is the shot of Tom Hanks pulling down a hood not a meme on the internet daily?
I didn't even think about it.
You have that shot, it's his face, and then he just pulls down a KKK hood and it zooms out to a bunch of like KKK riders. So they give Nathan Bedford Forrest Tom Hanks' face. So I was like, this should be all over Twitter all the time. This is the funniest thing ever.
I wish it was like Wikipedia picture for Nathan Bedford Forrest.
You should put that in there. Make it Tom Hanks.
I saw it in the movie. No, that's incredible. I had the coming on the roommate's bathrobe as my what the fuck moment.
Oh yeah. The only other one I had is it's really annoying every time I watch this movie. He jumps off the boat to go swim to Lieutenant Dan, and the boat keeps going this way, and then later on, 20 minutes later, it crashes into a dock the opposite direction. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? This is dumb.
You just paid $50,000 for that boat, and you're just left. Ugh.
Yeah,
and Lieutenant Dan doesn't even say anything either.
Yeah, he doesn't really care.
Any other what the fuck moments?
That's it.
All right, this is a topic that I don't know how much you have for, but best music moment or score recognition. I think. One, we could talk. I love the score for Alan Silvestri. I love the main theme. The main theme is great. The feather. I have now changed my thoughts on this soundtrack. I think this is one of the worst soundtracks I've ever heard. Like the music is good in this movie.
Yeah,
it is too much.
It's too much. It's every single Boomer song. Yeah, is put in there like CCR, Buffalo Springfield. Freebird's in there. I mean, all of it. And it's so much. And I wonder if it was more exciting at the time to remember those songs. And just since then, every time somebody goes back to the 60s or 70s, you cue those songs. And now I'm sick of them. I think it's the lamest cop-out in the world. I don't know if it was a cop-out in 94, though.
Well, my biggest complaint, so like this soundtrack obviously sold, I remember we had it on cassette tape. And again, great songs from these eras. They are the typical songs, you know, you get in your CCR, Buffalo Springfield, like we said, in the Vietnam moments and everything. But I swear, like if we're crediting the editor for doing such awesome work in the film editing,
yeah,
whoever is doing the freaking sound track editing on this, I hate them. It's
Oh yeah,
here. Give me 15 seconds of Blowing in the Wind. Give me 15 seconds of For What It's Worth by
yeah.
Buffalo Springfield. 15 like one right after another, and
It
it
really
was
clubs you over the head, and the visuals are clubbing you over the head of the '60s and '70s. So like the
yes,
music, it gets to be too much. They should have cut out half those songs and picked the ones they used more. And then
yeah,
there's like also dumb things where like God, I don't know the song, but they're like when she's about she's doing drugs and she's like a bruised face. Like there's a song that's like, "Do you see what's on my face? I've been hit around a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, I get it. The song doesn't have to explain to me what's happening here." There's a lot of that.
is that the
When he first
Doors?
fly like a free bird off of the balcony, like it's very
Yeah.
on the nose.
That was my biggest. I don't know if you had anything for this particular section, but yeah, that was the one thing I wanted to say. Is like the music could go to hell, honestly.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yep. All right, smash or pass, no, or fuck, Mary, kill. Mrs. Gump, Bubba, or Jenny.
Fuck, marry,
Jenny.
kill?
Fuck, Mary, kill.
Ooh.
I picked the 3 dead characters. If you didn't notice.
Oh, I didn't notice. I would kill Jenny, fuck Mrs. Gump, and marry Bubba.
Okay. Why? Yeah.
Because Jenny, I don't know. I mean, like, I could. Oof. Jenny might be objectively prettier. Mrs. Gump's a better, like, clearly.
Clearly.
Jenny's the one who deserves to die the most if anybody does.
I agree.
Yeah, and Bubba's just going to be a loyal partner your whole life.
I think that is.
Yeah.
I think that's a good. I think I agree with you on that.
I had to
Yeah,
like share a house and like what we're gonna do with our time and conversation, like with a person for the rest of my life. Bubba's the person I kind of want to hang out with most.
he would also have helped me out early on in my shrimping business
Yeah.
because he had experience, and yeah, Bubba has ambition.
Yeah, yeah.
None of these. Yeah. So I think I agree with you. Thank you for
You should
playing.
always marry your best good friend.
That's right. Marry your best good friend. All right. Who gave the best performance in your opinion?
Oh, I mean, I think you have to say Tom Hanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. He's top of my list. Gary Sinise is good in the time that he is given in this movie. Is really good in this movie. So, did you do any recasting for this movie?
I actually did a good bit.
Okay, I love it. Did you do any 94 recasting or did you?
Both.
Cool.
94, the author wanted John Goodman to play.
I saw that and I was like, interesting.
Interesting, right? Also in the book, Forrest is a big dude. He's like a football playing hayseed, right? Like he's big and broad too. He's not skinny like Tom Hanks is. Man, 94, there was a few I thought about for Forrest. Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey doing his like Truman Show era, but which he's not there yet in his career. But Jim Carrey could play the dumb and maybe play the drama pretty well. Daniel Stern came to mind as well.
I would have liked to have seen the John Goodman when that was mentioned. Like, give me John Goodman, make this a Coen Brothers movie instead of Zemeckis, and let's see where we go.
Forrest Gump, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I will say part from my trivia that their first choice was John Travolta for Forrest Gump. And then after that, they considered Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, and Matthew Broderick. Can you imagine Chevy Chase doing Bill Murray could bring some feels to it, but if it's Chevy Chase, it just becomes a comedy.
Matthew Broderick is such a weird one too.
I don't know. He did Southern and Biloxi Blues, but not very well. Well, no, because he was a New Yorker coming.
Yeah, he was a New Yorker. I forgot about
that. Yeah, they considered Joe Pesci for Lieutenant Dan, which is interesting. I said Mel Gibson
for Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah,
I like that. I think that's a really good one.
In 94. For Jenny, I wrote a lot down, but my favorite, I just didn't have a favorite. Talked about Uma Thurman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Michelle Pfeiffer I'd seen thrown out a couple times. Jodie Foster, Nicole Kidman, and Demi Moore turned down the role.
I thought about Demi Moore. I feel like Demi Moore could have done a good job, but she'd have to country it up and be a little more like flouncy as a character.
Yeah.
Which she usually is.
Holly Hunter? No, she would have.
Oh, Holly Hunter, yeah. I was going to say, my girlfriend, when I watched with it, she said to make a Twister reunion and make it Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt?
I like that. Helen Hunt. Okay.
Good. And then for Sally Field, Susan Sarandon, maybe. She was a little young, but so was Sally Field.
So
right?
was Sally Field. She was 10 years older than Tom Hanks.
Right.
Which is great. But I love Sally Field in this. She's like one of the. I don't think her or Forrest could be touched in this. I think any of the other ones could be.
Yeah, definitely Jenny. There are other people who could do just as well as Sinise, even though he did great. But yeah, Sally Field kills it, and so does Tom Hanks. It's kind of hard to replace that.
What do you think about? Did you have anything for 2024?
Yeah, Margot Robbie is Jenny.
Okay.
Although she'd be kind of wasted, but she'd be able to bring more to that thin character than's already there. She'd be able to like spruce it up. For Forrest, my favorite was Jesse Plemons as Forrest Gump.
Okay, I like that. I had Paul Dano down as Forrest Gump for mine.
My girlfriend said.
Nice.
That was her first pick. Yeah, I feel like Paul Dano, like he's I don't know, you gotta have to like make him more clean cut, all American a little bit.
Yeah,
like he's always so sallow and pale and like, but yeah, I think he'd have the acting to do it. And I thought about Adam Driver maybe. I don't know, he could do the voice right.
Yeah, can he play dumb enough? I love Jesse Plemons. Somebody said I love Jesse Plemons in there. I do love Jesse Plemons.
He's like the best up and coming actor. Yeah.
Just put Matt Saracen in there too. Let's just put the whole Friday Night Lights cast in here. I said Lily James for Jenny. Do you know who Lily James is? She is the girlfriend in Baby Driver.
I've never seen it. Yeah.
Oh man, but she does a Southern accent in there, and I was like, yeah, I think she could be that role. Bring back Robin Wright, make her Mrs. Gump.
Okay, sure. Why not?
And then that guy from...
I don't remember her ever being a good actor in the 90s, but I mean, yeah, House of Cards, right? Like she fucking kills it. So I was like,
kills it in that. Yeah. Now. Princess Buttercup.
Not great. Great movie. She's not doing anything special there. And
then I said Jeremy Allen White for Lieutenant Dan, he's the bear. If you've ever seen anything about the bear, that TV show.
Oh yeah, totally. He'd be great. Yeah. It'd be great. I didn't have good Lieutenant Dan's. If he wasn't hard canceled, I guess Ezra Miller was interesting. And then the other two are just too old. So I guess like needed them like 10 years ago. Like Christian Bale and Joaquin Phoenix, I think could have done good jobs with Lieutenant Dan, but I think they're maybe too old now.
Yeah. You picked guys that just are very angry in their movies. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fits. They're good at it. I would love to see Christian Bale just fucking lose it on somebody as Lieutenant Dan. All right.
Also, 94, I guess we could have well, I don't know when it came out, but we could have done Tom Cruise because he did Born on the 4th of July as a veteran who lost his legs. Yeah. You could have just taken, we just could have put that performance in there.
I've never seen Born on the 4th of July.
Once a long time ago, but I've definitely seen one scene where he screams penis over and over again.
I guess I need to watch it.
If you've never seen, it's in the movie, it is the most heartbreaking scene in the world because a veteran kid is screaming about how he lost his legs and his junk and he never even got to use it, and now the rest of his life he doesn't get it. It's really heartbreaking. But if you watch the clip where he just screams penis over and over and over again, it's amazing.
I can't wait. No, that's shooting to the top of the list for me.
Born on the 4th of July.
Any other casting?
Nope.
All right. Fun facts. Anything that you've researched, or we went over some of it, but
Tom Hanks's daughter was the girl on the bus that wouldn't let him sit next to little Forrest.
Don't love that.
Yeah. Like, hey, you want to be in this movie? You're going to be a mean girl to a disabled kid. The famous curve that he runs around, like that like steep curve that comes around, is now named Forrest Gump Curve.
Oh, okay.
And this is the most interesting one I had. 2015 Hollywood Reporter polled hundreds of Academy members, asking them to re-vote on controversial past decisions. And when they asked them to re-vote, the Academy voters would have given Best Picture to Shawshank instead of this.
Yeah, I saw that. Which we'll talk about more next week with Shawshank. Some things. With every transition of Forrest's age, he wears a blue plaid shirt at the first scene of every transition.
Oh, really?
Which I never noticed.
I kind of like, they don't quite stick with it, but it's like in every arc, he wears the same thing. Like he's wearing his military uniform through the whole like post-Vietnam thing until he becomes a ping pong player. And then after he's done doing ping pong, he's still dressed like a ping pong player for a while. Yeah. And then when he's a Shrimpo captain, he's just dressed like that every time.
Another thing is his eyes are closed in every picture that Forrest Gump takes.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
What was the other one? This is the one that I thought you might enjoy. Ricky J. Designed a special wheelchair for Gary Sinise that used an illusion to hide his legs, which were on a hidden platform underneath. The contortion required to sit in it meant that Sinise could only sit in it 10 minutes at a time. But Ricky J designed the wheelchair. That's pretty cool.
Amazing. I love Ricky J, of course.
Yeah.
What a hero.
So the way they did his stuff is like this: they wrapped his legs in blue fabric that they could later, remove digitally. And to strengthen the illusion that Lieutenant Dan's a real amputee, the makers often had Sinise move his legs around and digitally inserted objects like tables and walls where his lower legs would have otherwise hit them. So that's a unique way to do that, I guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. It looks really real, and Sinise sells it.
Yeah. The part where Ginny is throwing her shoes and stones at the house where she grew up, she collapses onto the ground in front of the house. That it's almost identical to a painting by Andrew Wyeth called Christina's World.
Oh yeah, that's a very famous painting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There was something else there's a missing scene where Ginny kills her dad.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's not in the book.
She straight up murdered. They filmed it. I'm pretty sure that's filmed
crazy.
it. She murders her dad, and like Forrest helps her get away with it, I guess, or just doesn't think anything of it. But yeah, she totally murders her dad.
Yeah, that is too messy for the characters. That's crazy. I want to see that scene though.
Yeah, that gets her fucked up.
Anything
else?
Forrest is like complicit in covering up because you got to keep Forrest like the little like innocent like lily white soul. You can't put any blood in his hands despite him shooting at Vietnamese people who were too inhuman to show.
Any other fun facts? Okay, cool. This is coming back by special request, so please just bear with me. It's time for the big question.
Answer the question.
Excuse me. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Okay, but the big question on everybody's lips. Yeah, they're chaplain. They're chaplain, right?
Does that answer your question?
Good question, Aguado.
No, that's the most important question to which I hope to find an answer.
All right, that was the theme song for the big question. The big question is this a good movie?
Cody, this is an amazing movie.
Okay.
I have so many criticisms of this movie, mostly political.
Yeah.
I love it so much. It's a masterpiece. And I only like dark shit and obscure shit and like complex, like deep stuff. I think this movie is a perfectly oiled magical machine.
I agree. I do agree. Like, you can tell by when we get rewatchability rating, even my overall star rate, like, this movie is messy. It is got a ton of scenes that you're just like, what? Like, obviously you have to suspend reality for a lot of this movie. Sure. Like, Forrest does the silliest things. He meets millions of people. He comes up with slogans for bumper stickers. It's all this shit that is just super goofy. But the heart of this movie, and I think like what you were saying about, I think it was Ebert or somebody else, just like the heart of this movie is just so fucking good.
One of a kind. And it's meticulously crafted. Like we can point out like the CGI things that like don't hold up as well. This movie's gorgeous. Every actor is making a choice in every moment. Every camera movement's making a choice. Every color is beautiful. Every scene is like every set piece is wonderful. This movie is lovingly crafted from beginning to end, and it's truly a joy to watch this. Yes. And I didn't know I was going to feel that way when I rewatched it, but I do.
And it is boomer porn, and I get it.
Yeah, and that's dumb. Yeah,
and that's dumb. Yeah, and this is how I learned half of the history that I knew growing.
I believe this is a deeply conservative movie, which I hate, and I love it.
Yes, I agree. No, yeah, I feel completely. I didn't know you were going to read that review at the beginning, but that review definitely sums up how I feel about this movie.
Yeah,
and this movie also is an interesting one because it keeps going back and forth on the internet. I continually see discourse around this. Even if I look up reviews of people I follow on my Letterboxd app, it's like I see a 1 star from somebody that I respect a lot, and then I see 5 stars from the next person. It is that polarizing at times where
that real quick to go into like I didn't get to read too much, but like skimming over like kind of deeper analysis of the film. I think Zemeckis and Tom Hanks and everybody else involved, like they want it to be a non-political film. But I did enjoy some of the people who were trying to like come up with ways that this is actually more subversive. Like somebody thought that like Forrest being a dim-witted observer who just passively watches all these things happen is an indictment of boomers themselves. Like that it's supposed to be a metaphor for, and I saw like there's one thing, like one of the last shootings you see with the attempt on Ronald Reagan, Forrest isn't watching TV, he's eating a sandwich and staring at the wall. And I was like, yeah, as an art film, this is like a deep metaphor for like boomers washing their hands of shit. And not all of them, of course. I'm being very like generalized for fun. But then we started watching it, and I was just like trying to interpret every line with a criticism of it. So like when she says, "Hey, this is your kid," and he gets scared, she goes, "What does she say?" She says, "Look, Forrest, like you don't have to do anything, and you didn't do anything wrong." And I was like, I was just like reading that as like a message to people. Right? Hey, you didn't do anything wrong, and you don't have to worry about anything. You're just brave. You were there. You made kids. Good job.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for your parents being the greatest generation, and you guys being boomers. Thanks for being born.
Right. So anyways, that took us off the big question or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did find it fascinating to read like ways in which people were like trying to make it subversive or whatever. But otherwise, everybody who is left, everybody who is against the norm, everybody who is different in any way is made to be a cartoonish freak who eventually destroys themselves and everybody around them. And good boys who go to war and do propaganda against the communists and just like to run. Oh my God, the scene where everybody's like, all the reporters are like, "Are you doing this for environmentalism? Are you doing this for women's rights? Are you doing this for this reason?" And he's like, "I just like to run." It's just like a big like, "Hey, way to go, man. Fuck all that noise. Like, you don't have to care about anything. You can just run." What a hero.
Oh, fun fact I forgot to mention is one of the reporters in that scene is Sally Field.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said, "Yep, Sally Field," randomly in that scene, playing a different character. So also anyway, with this being a good movie, I am going to go into my rewatchability. Like, if you had to give it a rewatchability rating, what do you give it out of 5?
I give this movie a rewatch of 5 of 5 and an overall of 5 of 5.
Yes, it is a rewatch. Because seriously, like, I will never not watch this movie when it is on. Whatever time. If I sit down and I see any scene, I'm watching it. Like, I don't know if there is a movie on television that can do that to me.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
10 minutes left in this movie, an hour and a half left in this movie, wherever this movie comes on, I'm watching it because I think it's that good and that quotable and that relevant.
Well, you're going to get something delicious in every 5 minutes.
Yes. Something is going to happen. You're like, you sit down, you're like, "Oh, this is right before this happens. Oh, this is right before he goes running." This is, I just think that perfectly sums up how this movie's good. Do you think with our view of this, is it special because of when we were born or when we watched it? Do you think that also means something? Because I can see people that are 20 years old or even like in their later 20s, anybody younger than that, not really connecting with this movie, having not seen it in 1994, 95, 96, like any of those times. And
that'll always be true. And it's impossible to read your own like bias completely. I like to think, and I like to think that I don't fall for nostalgia bias very often. I'm pretty good at like saying, recognizing this was trash, it was always trash, and I was wrong as a kid, or this is trash, it was always trash, but I like it still, and I'm just going to watch it even though it's trash. I can do that. Rewatching it, I think my enjoyment, I don't think it's nostalgia for the movie, but I do agree that learning about all the events and the culture that's covered, even if I hated the movie politically, my take on those things, I learned about those in the 90s. So it would be weird to be like 16 now and having learned about 20th century history the way you did, and then try to see this version of it. I think that would be difficult. But I still think that everybody can look at the performances and the filmmaking and find it wonderful.
Yeah, because I didn't think about this until just before we got on, where I saw that this is a part of like AFI's top 100 movies of all time,
Mhm.
and it's at like 79. Do I think that holds up now? Not at all. Like I don't think it's even on the list anywhere. Close. I don't think it'd be in the top 200 even. But
It's hard. We don't need to get in like a big conversation about it. But like ranking best films of all time, like it has a different. You can have a lot of 5 of 5 movies that don't belong on that list. This movie doesn't push anything. It has a very unique take on film and storytelling, but it doesn't push anything into brilliant new heights that it deserves to be that beloved. That is a generation over loving this movie that puts it on the list like that. And AFI's like that. AFI's likes blockbusters.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of ones on that list that come and go, and they haven't updated that in over 10 years now.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, last time they updated the AFI list was 2007. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it needs an update.
Cool.
Since Sight and Sound did it, this isn't even anywhere near Sight and Sound on their list. So, is there anything that you would say what is the most negative thing I think you'd say about this movie?
I think it's accidental political messaging and philosophical messaging is off point, whether that's understanding our own history as a country, our own like responsibility in society as individuals, and then also philosophically like to kind of cling on to aphorisms and superstitions and instead of moral principles and like hard work. I think all of that is accidentally very misleading for an audience. I think most people are mistaken if they're going to Forrest Gump looking for good versions of those things, but that is its biggest flaw. As far as like failing at anything it tried to execute, Jenny's character, and it's probably the biggest failure of hitting a target they were trying to hit. The first stuff I was saying is an accidental flaw of the movie, I think.
Yeah. I think some of the comedy is a little too goofy at times. And that's just my part. I think the best parts are the dramatic, like the ones, especially like you were talking about, where it's like towing the line between comedy and drama, like the scene with Lieutenant Dan pulling him out of bed. It's like a really serious, dramatic scene. And then Tom Hanks still pulls it back in. So I think I agree with you on that. Like a fine wine and dish, if you could pair this movie with another movie for a double feature, what would you choose?
They're pretty obvious ones. The two I had were either Apollo 13 for the Tom Hanks, Sinise, also nostalgia for movies I saw a million times as a kid. Putting those together makes a lot of sense. And then the other one I had was Rain Man.
Okay. Yeah, Rain Man. I didn't even think of that. I chose Being Human, which is a Peter Sellers movie where he's
Being Human. People love that movie.
Yeah. I think you'd like it. I think
I would too. I just never got to it.
I picked Big Fish.
Oh, you love Big Fish.
Which is the greatest movie since Wizard of Oz.
That's the reason I love it.
Also,
for chat, we've had this conversation before where I was a little kid and I liked movies a lot, and I saw the Big Fish trailer, and it's one of the reviews was this is better than Wizard of Oz, is what the fucking trailer to Big Fish said. So I was like, I want to see this. It looks pretty cool, and I went there and I was like, this movie sucks. And I've never revisited it.
Secret Life of Walter Mitty was another one that I wrote down. Which,
oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. That's it. Is there anything that we missed with Forrest Gump? We missed a lot with Forrest Gump, but it's a big movie with a lot of little stuff.
A long podcast. I knew it was going to be a long podcast, but yeah, there's a lot to sift through here.
Yeah. So Ryan, thank you. Is there anything that you've watched recently that you'd like to recommend to people?
I have finally pulled the trigger on trying to rewatch all of Akira Kurosawa's movies in a row. I have gotten through a lot of them. I've gotten through all the ones that you really don't need to see, and I'm ready to get into the ones that are good. So I think one of your favorites is the last one I watched, which is Stray Dog.
Yeah, Stray Dog's great.
Stray Dog's a really cool. It's a really cool cop movie. A master director, like finally coming into his own, about to make the 15 best movies ever made, like in a row, kind of. Stray Dog's leading into that, and a very beautiful cop movie with a simple premise, which is a rookie cop gets his gun stolen, and he pairs up with a grizzled old cop to track down his gun. As bullet by bullet, it's being used to do horrible things, and he feels guilty about it. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I love that movie. It's a good movie. Anything else, or has it just been a Kurosawa fest?
It's Kurosawa Fest, and there's been some other things. I've been watching Ken Russell movies, which means rewatching The Devils from 1971. Chat, you should go watch The Devils. It is the most disturbing, controversial, fucked up movie you'll ever see. And it was Oliver Reed and Vanessa.
Yeah, I love Oliver Reed. He's
he's
incredible
amazing in this movie too. He is just chewing it up.
He is Athos Athos in all the Three Musketeers movies from the 70s, which are terrible movies, but he is so good. I love that guy.
Good. And after watching The Devils, I'm like, where did your career go? And he did a lot of things, but I was like, he should have been a top tier actor. He was so good.
I think I went on a streak watching a couple of his The Brood. He's in The Brood, David Cronenberg movie, which I fell in love with. You know, obviously there's like body horror elements in that movie, and it's a horror movie, so might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I fucking love The Brood. One that I've watched recently is I watched Coffee, which is a what is her name? Jackie Brown. She played Jackie Brown. Pam Grier. Sorry, it's a Pam Grier movie. I watched that the other day and actually really liked that movie. I mean, it is what it is. You know exactly what you're getting with that movie, but I thought it was pretty well done. And, for those kind of like Pulp Fiction-esque movies and 70s type movies, blaxploitation movies that were huge at that time, I think it's pretty good. So definitely watch that. But
that's cool.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you again so much. Next week, we are continuing Oscar month. We're going to be watching Shawshank Redemption. It's currently streaming on VOD. I don't think it's streaming in any of the platforms right now. And we'll be doing that stream next Sunday at 5 p.m. Also, don't forget about the special episode at the end of the month where we're talking about kids who hate their parents movies, where we're going to be talking about North, Trading Mom, worst movie ever, Getting Even with Dad, and Camp Nowhere. So look forward to those movies and look forward to talking with everybody else about those. Ryan, you're amazing, as always. Chat, you're amazing. Part-time.
I'll leave you with the fact that in the second book, Forrest Gump causes the Exxon Valdez crash.
We'll end on that.